Hello, everybody. That was for Gary. Hello, everybody. It's Friday afternoon. I was going to say night, but it's not night time yet, even though it's dark. Okay, so I've come on to do a little bit of practice around Suzuka. A couple of reasons why. One, I let myself down a little bit at Bathurst. I'm not going to give any excuses. I just didn't have a good race. And fair play to Steve on taking the win. Steve on finishing second, and James on finishing third. I thought he was going to win it. He was unlucky. And another reason is, I know a couple of people may want a guide video around this particular track, and the only way I can really do a dead short one is if I go and do a bit of practice. So that's basically what I'm doing here. I'm going to go for a bit of practice around Suzuka, because I mean, even though for me I take a very similar process from one car to the next around any of the tracks, with this car there are some differences in certain corners compared to like faster cars. So the things that I need to kind of work out are sorry, I'm just trying to save while I talk, and I can't. Yeah, so there's a couple of braking points. Turning points don't really differ. But it's to do, a lot of it around Suzuka is to do with how much grip does this car have, and whether I can be on throttle or off throttle, for example in the first sector. So yeah, a lot of it is just simply down to fine-tuning a few different things and then spotting those markers that I give out. Now Suzuka is a track that I absolutely adore. I love driving around this circuit, as long as the car I'm driving can handle it. There's nothing worse than driving around here in a car that is fucking horrible to drive, because sector 1 becomes evil and the rest is just horrid. Now obviously we don't have setups available on the cars, so we just have to drive it as is, but we do have fuel usage and tyre wear. Now normally Suzuka's quite aggressive on tyre wear, but in this car it shouldn't be too bad. Let's put it this way, it shouldn't be so bad that it's a problem, but I don't think double stinting would be the best of ideas around this particular track. Now something I do want to quickly point out here is this white line, the pit exit white line. Bear that in mind. I always use that as a reference marker for turns 1 and 2 around Suzuka. Doesn't matter what car I'm in, I use it as a reference point. And there's a couple of things that I do when I'm sort of taking a car around this track for the first time. There's a few key things that I need to find out, and it's always worth trying. Chances are you're going to go off the track, but it's worth trying and finding out whether you think it is doable or not. So for example, this next right-hander coming up, given the speed of this car, is this corner flat out, or do you need to downshift or lift? Now I've gone off, but I'm not actually at racing pace yet either, so that's something that I will need to try and find out. Also, for example, do I need to lift before this kink, or can I drive all the way around it and then bang the brakes on? To be honest, I think that'll be the way that this car will cope with it. The faster the car, the more likely you are that you need to lift before the kink or around the kink. Now for spoon, I'm already thinking, okay, well I'm probably going to want third gear for the second part of the corner, but is the first part fourth gear or is it third gear? And we'll find that out as I build the speed up. And then obviously into the final couple of corners, is the R130 flat out or not? And then what's the braking point for the final chicane? Now to be fair, the R130 in this car should be easily flat out, even on warm tyres. So basically what I'm going to do here is drive round and see what I can learn and make a few mistakes while I do it. Now I mentioned about the pit exit white line. The reason I use that as a reference is because that white line tends to either be a point you might need to lift off or start turning in. So I basically approach it, end of the white line, I'm going to stay flat out, brake at the start of the curb, and I haven't made the corner, right? So what I've used the white line for there is a turn in point. And so okay, well it turned in okay, but I just couldn't get it slowed down to make the corner. So that then would suggest that on the next lap what I might need to do is lift off at the end of the white line and turn in and see if I can stay on the track, and if I can't, then I know I'm going to need to lift off and brake. Now I'm not focusing too much on turns 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 at the moment, because they are all dependent on how you take turn 1 and 2. If you slow through 1 and 2, you can't really focus properly on what is happening in that middle sector, sorry, on those few corners. You can really get early on the power around that hairpin. Now one of the things you want to try doing around a corner like this, where it's a long curve, as little steering angle as possible. The more steering angle you got on, the slower you're going to go. Okay, you're not, if you brake at 50 meters there, you're definitely not carrying fourth gear. You'd have to brake so hard and get it down to third. There's a service road, I might try using that as a braking point. Now I know some people struggle with the R130. A trick I've found to it is 50 meters, start turning in, and it's a dead easy corner. You don't even have to steer a lot. Okay, braking at about 110 for the final chicane. Okay, so this time I'm still going to focus on the pit lane white line, but what I'm going to do this time is lift off and turn in and see if I make the corner. Not bad. I got on the brakes quite late, so that's why I've gone off, but I know that I can lift off and initially turn in. Now that's no surprise to me, because I would normally expect to start having to brake at the start of the curb on the right hand side, regardless of what car I'm in. If it's a race car, a fast one, it's at the start of the curb on the right. If it's a car that's got no fucking grip or is extremely fast, then instead of lifting off, turning in and then braking, it would be a case of lifting, braking and turning in. Okay, that's definitely either going to need just a lift or a lift and a downshift to fourth. Oh, too early on the power that time. I was going to run wide. Okay, so for the start of Spoon, there's a service road on the right hand side. I'm going to use that as my braking point on this occasion, see if I can get around in fourth gear. Yep, fairly comfortable. And then off the throttle down to third. Now hopefully you'll see, like similar to a lot of my videos, I'm not doing anything erratic through those two corners at the moment. It's all sort of one lift off, one brake, one turn, and it's all very calm, and that is on purpose. Okay, so this time I'm going to lift off and turn in at the end of the white line, but I'm going to be on the brakes at the start of the curb on the right hand side. And you'll notice I wasn't fully on the brakes, I was only gently on the brakes. Right, now, is this corner flat out? Yes, it is. You have to test that, because for some cars it is and others it isn't. And now hopefully you'll have noticed I only did one downshift through the whole course of those corners, and it was for the final right-hander, the tighter corner. Tried pushing the braking point a little further then and didn't quite like it. So I'll use the service road again. Didn't apply enough brake that time, so basically I've just had to wait and let the car slow itself down before I can then tuck it down into third gear and turn into the corner properly. So 50 metres, start turning in. Don't have to turn that much, which means you're saving tyre life. Ooh, you do not want to clip the grass when you're braking though. Right, now the process that I used on the last lap for turn 1, I'm going to go with the same process, but I'm going to see if I can brake a little bit less, because the idea is to tuck into towards the curb at turn 1, run out to the curb after turn 1 to really be able to... Oh, that's too far, I went in too quick. Yeah, so the idea is to not do what I just did, but to tuck into the apex at 1 and then out to the curb. And that opens up turn 2 then, and makes turn 2 a much faster corner. The tighter you come out of turn 1, the tighter turn 2 becomes. Now personally I prefer to approach these two corners on the left hand side here, so that you're not moving over to the left. It helps avoid dipping a wheel on the grass when you're braking. Now one thing we might find about this track is that although yes the tyre wear is not massively severe, the amount of grip you'll receive might not be very good as the tyres do begin to wear. I really don't think double stinting a set of tyres is going to be beneficial. Pain in my hand. Ugh. So a little bit like how I dipped a wheel on the grass around here, if I actually get over to the left a little earlier, I can brake in a straighter line, avoiding dipping a wheel. Alright, let's see if we can get this properly this time. No, no, no. The grip's not there. Interesting. Interesting. Right, okay. In that case then it's going to need a little bit of braking a little earlier. It would appear that as the tyres have started to wear, it hasn't got that bite in the track like there. Now, something I would say that is, if you find yourself in this situation where you haven't quite got the grip or the feel of grip in the front tyres in that first sector, going up and down and up and down and up and down the gears will not help you. There's a simple process for turn 2 to the first Degner, sorry. If you don't know which the first Degner is, it's the right-hander just before going under the track. There's two right-handers, Degner 1, Degner 2. Degner 1's the fast one. So literally from turn 2 to turn 7 you can do that whole sector with very minimal gear changes, even if you find yourself in a bit of trouble. So the way that I would work it now already is, my aim would be to go from turn 3 to turn 7 in 4th gear. If I'm offline in any way, shape or form, I may need 3rd gear. If I do need to use 3rd gear, I'll probably stay in it, because if I'm offline once, chances are you're going to be offline again through that whole sequence of corners. I'm sure you'll have heard me say before, if you get turn 3 wrong, chances are you're going to go off at turn 7. Get turn 4 wrong, you're going to go off at turn 7. Right, so this time I'm going to do a little bit of braking. Needed a little more braking. The tyres are not liking that at all. Right, we'll get on top of that. So see, no gear changes. The way to avoid having to change gear here is lifting off earlier. You may need a lift here, but if you get the turning point right, you won't. So that's turn 3 to turn 7 all in one gear, no dramas. Now, something that I know a few people do struggle with around this track is having spins at certain points. Up here being one of them, if you run a little wide, or mid-corner here, or on the exit. If you find yourself getting on these exit curbs too much, don't try and steer back onto the track, straighten the wheel up. If you try and steer back onto the track, you'll spin. I should probably get one more lap out of the fuel. Okay, so my aim as well for turn 2 is to be able to take turn 2 in third gear, like that, turned in a touch soon, but by running all the way out to the left, I was able to get on the power so much sooner. But carrying that extra speed, I didn't lift off early enough. But need to know that. So the way that I would potentially fix that there is, because I went off not at turn 3, I went off at turn 4. It'd be easy to think, oh well, just lift off at turn 4. Well, you can, but if you lift off at turn 3, you'll be going a little slower into turn 4, and that might actually just help you stay on the racing line. So sort of prevention is better than cure. I mean, if you start running wide, there's not a lot you can do. You're going to run wide and you're losing time. So now another aim as well is for turn 3 to turn 7 is to never have to use the brakes. Because the way that I see that is, if you can get through there without using the brakes, then you're not having to excessively slow down. It means you're going faster. It also means you're probably going to use a little less fuel, because if you're braking then accelerating, that's going to use more fuel. Now I know I haven't spoken yet about what I am doing through the final chicane. I will get to that, because there is a particular process that I am going through, but I just want to get the rest of the track done first. Now most of it I'm already very happy with, but with Suzuka a lot of it comes down to, excuse me, make sure you get turn 1 and 2 right. So if that means slowing down a little bit more, do that, because you'll lose a hell of a lot less time slowing down a little more than going off the track. Because if you go off at turn 1 wide, oh, it takes a while to get going again. Now the other place that you really do not want to go off is here. If you find yourself off to the right there a lot, it could be a number of reasons. Usually it's turning in too soon, which gives you the wrong angle around the corner, and the natural angle the car wants to go at that speed is out wide. So you can try turning in a little bit later. Another reason quite often is that people go into that corner too fast. So sometimes in some cars it needs a little lift. But for that left-hander turn 7, which is Dunlop, where your car is positioned before you turn in is crucial. Which means the right-hander before Dunlop is crucial. The only way you can get that right-hander correct is if you get the previous corner correct. So literally turn 3 to turn 7 are all connected, which is why if you get one wrong, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, eventually with you ending up off track at turn 7. Now in this car, a lot of potential offs can be saved, like for example from turns 3 to turn 7, or even just around turn 7. You can save yourself from going wide by just doing a little lift before you turn in. If you do the little lift before you turn in, the car will turn in better, and then you can stay on the throttle. If you don't do the lift and you turn in and then realise you need to lift, it will cost you a little more time. Now, I know that that sounded awfully slow. I wasn't looking at the speedo because for me it was all about car position round there. Oh, dipped a wheel on the grass, you bellend. Yeah, if you do that, there's nothing you can do to save it. Unless you get extremely lucky. But that was from basically turn 3 to turn 7, no using the brake, no changing of the gear. If I was going to change gear at any point, it would have been for that last right-hander and dropping it down to 3rd gear. But you can save yourself a lot of damage in that last right-hander by lifting off nice and early. Well, I say nice and it's not early, by lifting off at a decent distance before the corner to allow the car to slow down that little bit more. If you find yourself running a little bit wide when you turn in and you're in 4th gear, by all means knock it down to 3rd, but if you knock it down to 3rd and then floor it, you're still going to run wide, and you do not want to run wide at that corner, because if you do, you're then in the wrong position for Dunlop. Lost a lot of time cocking up that middle sector. You'll see there, I'm not rushing to get the car slowed down, I'm not rushing with the downshifts, and I'm not rushing to get the car turned in. Got a little wobble on there. So even though I did drop it down to 3rd, it's not... Okay, I'm getting two different... Getting a red in the middle of the screen and a blue in the bottom right corner. I wouldn't say it's not gained me any time, but... It might have done. And to be fair, I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Now you can be quite aggressive out of slow corners with this car, and by that I mean you can go full throttle quite early. Nice time gain through there, I think. Okay, I'm just going to stop for a moment. I said I'd mention about the final chicanes, and I'm going to do that right now because something just happened that I've been waiting for. Every other lap going through the final chicane, I've braked at about 110 metres, 2nd gear for the right hand left corner. But what I've been doing is turning into the right hand part and then gently applying the throttle, getting off it, and then turning into the final left-hander and booting it. Now, the way that I am actually going through that final chicane is, there is a certain point that I want to be turned and full throttle, right? But my speeds can vary, which means I have to use different amounts of throttle input between the two corners. Okay, if I use too much, I go too fast, I miss the point that I need to turn to get full throttle on. If I don't accelerate enough, it's not too much of a problem, but I can't afford to accelerate too soon. On the time I've just gone through the chicane there, and feel free to go back and have a look, you'll notice that I didn't touch the throttle between the right hand corner and the left hand corner, and the reason for that was the speed I was carrying between the two corners was, for me, very good, which meant I didn't have to get back on the throttle. Okay, so that's kind of ideal situation. I was able to continue effectively slowing the car down through the right hander and then just turn in for the left. I didn't have to apply the throttle again, so that's kind of ideal scenario. However, when I'm not getting it ideal, and that's usually because from applying too much brake before the chicane, I am aware that I may need to apply some throttle, but the amount of throttle I apply varies because I need to make the specific turn-in point that will allow me to go full throttle, right? I'm going to try and get round there, and I'll sort of slowly show it what I mean. Now, I did also mention as well about turn 3, about how you could lift off before turn 3. Well, the reason for that is if you find yourself running wide at turn 4, then what you can do is get it up into 4th gear here, do a tiny lift, and then lift off, and it just gives you a very balanced car, and your chance of running wide reduces massively just from doing that. However, if you can go through that left-hander flat out and lift early enough, you can still make the next corner. But it's just, if you're struggling and you find yourself running out wide, put that lift in there, it makes a big difference. Now, there's a feature to this game that I've mentioned before, and it's something that I've said that I'm looking for this to know that I've got the grip, because obviously you can feel the grip, but there's a visual sign as well, and through these two corners it's very noticeable. Not necessarily the first part, but as I'm approaching the turn-in point and I'm in 3rd gear, the car will be turning in, and then all of a sudden it'll be like there's a little wobble. It looks like a wobble, but it's actually the tyres gripping and the car's just turning a little bit, right? And at that point I know, got the grip, boot it. Right? It's very easy for me to see that visual effect on the screen because I'm looking for it. However, it might be very difficult for other people to see it. I mean, I'm seeing it, feeling it, so it may be difficult for other people to actually spot what I mean, but once you notice that, it can be a very, very useful tool, because you'll know when you've got grip on the front end and when you haven't. Okay, so the final chicane, as I said, braking at 110, and the aim is to take these two corners in 2nd gear, right? Now, you can do this in one of two ways, right? If you struggle with this chicane, don't fuck about, brake as hard as you can at 110 metres, get it down to 2nd gear and stay off that fucking throttle, right? That's the safest way through this corner. As you get more used to it, that's when you'll find that having slowed the car down in got into second gear, got around the corner, you'll feel like you want to speed up before the left-hander. That's fine. But what you need to be able to do is to be able to turn in and be full throttle at this point. So very early on. Alright, so if I just change my camera angle, it is very early at the corner. Right now, if you accelerate for too long between these two corners, you're going to lift off and then you're going to be running a little bit wide. So instead of you being turned in and full throttle at this point, you're going to be running towards the right a little bit and you're going to be off throttle, and you don't want to do that. So start off with brake at 110 and brake hard, get it down to second gear and make the right hand corner. Once you're doing that consistently, then you can work on, if you need to speed up between the two, doing that a little bit. But what you can then also start to do is, as you're getting the braking and second gear for the first part consistently correct like that, where you're not going deep, you're not running wide, you're not making any mistakes, then what you can start to do is brake at the 110 meters and bang those brakes on. But then as you get down to, say, third gear, you can start lifting your brake pedal a little bit, still going down to second gear, but then just carrying a little bit of speed, a little bit of more speed into the right hander, which means you can then use less throttle between the two corners. Now, I know that I'm using fourth gear throughout all of this. What I will say is, if you do struggle with turns 3 to 7, then what I would say is use third gear. Okay, turn into turn 3 flat out in fourth, and then lift downshift to third, and do not change out of third gear until you are on the exit of turn 7. Once you start doing that and you can consistently, comfortably get through those corners, what you will find is you will start to carry more speed, and you will automatically want to go into a higher gear, because third gear will not be fast enough for you. So that's when you can start going, okay, well, I'll carry fourth gear through turn 3 and then try carrying it through turn 4. And when you can do that, you can try carrying it through turn 5 as well, and turn 6, and so on. Now, one of the reasons why, I mean, I'm not going to say that I make it look easy, but if you watch this and you think I make it look easy, it's only because the things that I am saying I have been through and done in a number of different cars around this track. So I already know everything that I'm expecting to do when I drive the car out of the pits. It's just those fine little details that I'm looking at after that. So whereas you may have to really concentrate on where you're turning in, where you're positioning your car, I'm doing a lot of that subconsciously. I can still fuck up now and again though. But there, gone a bit too wide. I think it will be faster taking that last right-hander in third. I mean, I've got more fuel on now than when I did the faster lap, so it's difficult to judge. A little late on the brakes then. because I was a little late on the brakes, I had to wait before I could get on the throttle. Now, interestingly, I didn't see the wobble, but I went on the throttle and I ended up having to lift off the throttle, which means I got on the throttle too soon. I mean, I say wobble, it's not a wobble, it's just the car gripping up. Okay, so brake about 110. So my tiny little bit of throttle application there, it isn't just randomly done. It's, okay, I've slowed down a tiny little bit too much. I need to give myself a bit of extra speed, but only a tiny bit, to make sure that I can still turn in and power on at the point that I want. Oh, too aggressive on the way in. Interestingly, this car doesn't like attacking turn 1 too much. So this is where I was saying about you don't want to run wide at turn 1 and 2. You really don't. So it'll be worth just giving it a tiny bit of brake a little bit sooner, rather than having that carrying too much speed and understeering off the track. Right, I'm going to see if I can take spoon properly this time and see if the wobble is noticeable. And my eyes are playing up at the minute. Now, I wasn't going into the corner quick enough to really be pushing the limit of the grip, so the wobble wasn't there on that occasion. Ooh, it didn't want to slow down that time. I'm guessing I must have dipped a wheel on the grass, which is why it didn't quite want to slow down properly. Okay, so I'm going to start taking a slightly more cautious approach into turn 1 because the risk is very high. And that is a lovely line. A bit too much curb. I have to use a little bit of brake there just to balance the car. That's not bad sector time, considering. not bad through those two corners. First bit was alright, I was a bit off pace between the two corners. You see how early I was able to be on the throttle there? Now admittedly I did also do a short shift to third gear, but that's because I'm very close to the top of the rev range anyway. But coming out of the final chicane at Suzuka, the faster the car, the more dangerous the final right-hander is, even though it looks a very simple corner. It is so easy to spin there, and you can solve that just by short shifting. Okay, for me it's looking for the first Dagner like it's better to stay in fourth rather than go up to fifth and come down, but if there's cars in front you may need to go up to fifth, but you should be able to do that much sooner with the slipstream. I got very lucky then between those two corners. I was way too far out wide, but because I stayed off the throttle and I straightened up my steering, I was able to get the car under control and then get it into the next corner and gain time in the sector. Dipped a wheel in the grass. Lost a lot of time there. Actually, saying that, no, the spoon isn't in that sector, is it? It's in the previous sector, yeah. So a lot of that time lost was all just that final corner. Oh, gone wide. The line round one was lovely, just didn't slow down enough for two. Now the tyres are starting to hurt a little bit on the front, but not to a point that would concern me in a race situation, especially given that in a race situation there's probably only another lap's worth of fuel. Done it again, you bellend. Right, I really need to avoid that left hand side. Now there's only one way really to avoid doing that, and it is don't run all the way up to the edge of the track, which obviously I am doing too much. Right, would it? Yeah, we'll get another lap in. A little time gain on that sector. Front tyres couldn't cope with that then. There was a little too much steering angle with too much throttle, and he just wanted to understeer. Now you see there how when I really got all over that curb, my steering sort of twitched right a little bit, straighten up. That's not by chance, that was me straightening it up, because if I didn't, I'd spin. Right, do not dip a wheel on the grass, you bell end. Okay, let's see. 1.1 of fuel, and I'm pretty sure I used 1.0 in that last lap. So let's see if we can get another lap out of it. Okay, so I got one of the corners slightly wrong there, running wide on turn 4. Dropped it down to 3rd to save myself, but didn't go back up to 4th. It wasn't on. Now something I will say is, for anyone that may be watching at this point, if this is a track where you decide to try and run long and save a bit of fuel, do your fuel saving from turn 3 to turn 7. It's the only place that you can do it without losing too much time. And you're still going to lose time, but you try doing it anywhere else on this track, you will hemorrhage time. But to be honest, I wouldn't even bother fuel saving. I'd just absolutely go for it. Okay, so what was catching me out with dipping a wheel on the grass was the slight kink in the braking zone. I was aware of it, I was just not doing it. Interesting. So a full burn fast lap is using 1.0% of fuel, which to me would suggest, yeah, don't even bother fuel saving. Oh, Right, well, I'm going to be disappearing in a moment, but before I do, what I am going to do is just go and do a couple of laps in the car that's going to be used in the next championship, which is Group 2, with balance of performance on, tyre wear and fuel wear. I've turned it off for the moment, just because I don't know what settings they are going to use. Now, there's two reasons why I'm going to do a couple of laps in this car. One is so people can see if my processors are different in this car, or if my processors are very similar. And another is because this car around this track should be quite interesting. However, I will say the DGT admins, they've got the balls out a little bit with this car, because this car on BOP increases its horsepower but increases its weight. It does make the car a little bit edgy, but it's still a fucking brilliant car. Now, personally, I would have ran it slightly detuned because it handles amazingly then, but to be fair, there's no edginess to it. So I can see why they've gone with the setting that they have. So yeah, it goes from 548 to 632 brake horse. And it actually hasn't increased the weight. Now, usually I don't mind more power in cars. I mean, I don't mind it in this, but it definitely does make it a little more edgy. So a couple of the corners where in the Mazda I'd mentioned, like the second part of Spoon, running a little bit wide, straighten up that steering. If you do not do it quickly, you will you are going to be facing the wrong way. Well, no, you're going to be in the barrier on the left hand side of the track. Now it turned in sharper than I was expecting. This is definitely a much edgier car. Hey, see how close I was to running wide there? And I did a lift. If I hadn't have done the lift, I'd have been off. Didn't slow it down enough. Now, given the power in this car, I can't quite yet go full throttle when I would like to in the final couple of chicanes, but a lot of it is because I'm getting the right hand part wrong. Had to double lift that time. That's what you call do everything you can to not end up in the wall. Now that was with me keeping the wheel straight. Imagine if I'd have fucking tried turning it back onto the track. Okay, so braked a little bit earlier. Was able to get on the power a little sooner, but I haven't got the confidence in this car to go full throttle in second there. Not on the curbs. That's a little bit out of control, that. But this is where, overall, the processors that I'm using are exactly the same, but with just tiny little bits of fine-tuning because of the speed difference of the car, the grip difference of the car. There was the wobble, couldn't go full throttle though. So I was too late in spotting it. So for example with the R130, I'm still turning in at the 50 metre marker board. But because this car is so much faster and got so much more grip, my turning point is exactly the same as in the Mazda, but I don't have to steer anywhere near as much. Now you may have seen the first lap that I did in this car around the R130, I turned in at 50 metres and I was all over the curb on the left hand side because it turned in a lot sharper than I was expecting. Once I'd clocked that, I was like, okay, let's just do a nice little gentle turn, and it works because this car's got the grip, it's got the downforce, it's got the ability to do that. So you don't always have to go aggressive on the steering. Anyway, right, that's me done for now because I'm absolutely busting for a piss and I need to go and get myself some dinner. So have a good one, everybody. Get your practice in for Suzuka, because I'm fucking going to, because, yeah, I need to make up for a shocking Bathurst race. Anyway, have a good one, and I'll see you all again soon.